Well, everybody, welcome back to yet another Real Politics Xanderhal video. That's right, we're doing real politics in this video. So buckle up, it's going to be dry, and it's going to be serious. It is going to be quite serious. In fact, we're going to start off with a little bit of a history lesson about the lovely nation of Iran. Now, there is a lot of fucking history that goes into this. So much history that at a certain point I was like, wow, I need to lay back and like close my eyes and realize that there's no chance that I'm going to be able to learn enough about this to give a whole, wholly encompassing explanation of all of the factors that go into this story. But I do feel like I gave myself enough of a history kind of course, a little mini history course on this topic to give enough of an insight into why this particular topic is so sensitive and why it has caused so much unrest in the nation of Iran. So, let's start with the Iranian Revolution. Okay? So, back in the, it was also called the Islamic Revolution. You may have heard of it. Back in school, we grew up in Florida, grew up in American, southern, South, in the South, in American school. You don't really learn a lot about the history of other countries. So the Islamic Revolution was pretty much the only word in most of this stuff that, besides obviously the very surface level stuff, that I was like, okay, I've heard. I remember learning about that in middle school, very briefly. Okay, I know generally what's being discussed here. Besides that, it was a whole historical deep dive, a lot of new information for me, and I must say, I was actually pretty interested in a lot of cool stuff I learned. And I don't want to say that in so cool, but there was some interesting shit I learned on this little history adventure. Anyway, so. Back in the late 1970s, early 1980s, for a while, for I think it was 35 years, correct me if I'm wrong, Iran was ruled by the, please don't say, please tell me my pronunciation is right, Palavi Dynasty, okay? Now this dynasty was it was a government that was very, very much sympathetic to Western ideals. And through this, they basically instilled what we would nowadays consider to be reactionary, anti-religious freedom policy onto much of the Muslim population of Iran. And this led to things such as banning the wearing of veils. It led to things such as banning the public praying, just very shitty, cracking down on people's religious freedom kind of stuff, and obviously there was not a very positive response from the Muslim population that was now being literally oppressed for their religious beliefs at this point, and there was a revolution. And I'm not going to go into all the details, because if I did, I would, one, probably risk getting details wrong and looking like an idiot, because I'm going off the top of my memory here. And two, I honestly don't know enough about it to I don't know enough about it to go super deep into it. And three, it's not 100% necessary. Regardless, though, the guy who took power after the fall of the Pahlavi dynasty was this guy named Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. Now, Khomeini. There we go. Khomeini. Am I pronouncing it right? Tell me in chat. Regardless, though, now the revolution was heavily supported by people on the left, leftists, progressives, people that were, sympathetic to the plight of those having their religious freedom taken away. However, one thing that I noticed in my journey researching this topic was that I don't think liberals were a very big fan of the Islamic Revolution. Maybe not in hindsight, because I was doing research on all of this, and I ended up talking to my mom. This, obviously Saturday Night Live watching liberal, right? And I tell her about some of the stuff that I've been researching. And she goes on this very bizarre rant about how, well, it was very Islamophobic. I feel it would be very bad for me to even try to paraphrase some of the things that she said. Felt a little Islamophobic, to say the least, which is exactly where this leads. Islamophobia. That is the sort of lumbering kind of worry, the thing that a lot of particularly liberals are kind of too afraid to talk about and condemn the laws in Iran over. You see, what's happening right now in Iran, in modern day, is actually very similar, ironically enough, to the regime that came before it, in that people are having their religious freedom and their freedoms of expression, their freedom to live their lives and to express their belief systems, to, adhere to their faith as they choose to. They are having that taken away from them. It is being cracked down upon. And the people are not happy. One of the most notable examples of this is that in Iran, there is a very, very strict code of modesty law. And they even have their own entire police force called the Moral Police. I believe that's the term. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it moral police? Or is it the modesty police? I know it's an M word. Morality police, thank you. Yes, the morality police. Something that literally sounds like something out of a fucking satire novel about like a dystopian future. Anyway, this specific unit is tasked with enforcing a dress code for women in the country. You see, not everybody who practices Islam necessarily believes in the idea that a woman's beauty is to be hidden from all but her husband, with the exception of some family members. Some people have their own faith in their own ways. Some people, just generally don't think that that is something that they want to. It doesn't matter why they don't want to follow that particular tenet of Islam. And it doesn't matter whether or not you agree with that tenet. It should not be a law that is enforced by, in the example of Iran, up to 50 lashings. That's right. There have been women caught without wearing a veil that have been subjected to up to 50 lashings, if I recall correctly. Just ridiculously cruel punishments for this kind of thing. So naturally... Oh, and finally, I want to finish off the mini history lessons. We're dipping a little bit into what's happening now, but I want to finish off the history lesson with a final point of irony. Not only is the level of crackdown and the taking away of religious freedom of the people of Iran right now arguably quite similar to what happened in the opposite, where they cracked down on Islam and essentially tried to ban it as much as they could. Before, under the Palavi Dynasty. It's funny that now, what used to be seen as a form of protest against the previous dynasty, wearing a veil in a form of protest, is now the opposite. Not wearing a veil, or wearing a veil while also kind of bending the rules of the dress code a little bit, is now seen as the new form of protest. It really is wild how times change, but it kind of, interesting little thing I noticed. Regardless, though, pointing out rhyming in the annals of history aside, I think it's time to get to the more modern, the more current stuff happening in Iran right now. This is from Reuters. I'm going to read it to you guys so you guys can get the knowledge absorbed into your beautiful, wrinkly brains. This is from Reuters. Protesters rally across Iran in third week of unrest over Amini's death. I should remind you guys here. Let me actually I gotta give you guys the full scoop. First, we start with this. We need more background details, okay, on the particular protests that are happening right now. Mahsa Amini, how one woman's death ignited protests in Iran. Mahsa Amini died in custody after being detained by Iran's morality police. In the 13 days since her death, thousands have taken to the streets to protest against the country's hijab laws. Mahsa Amini, 22, was younger than me, by the way. Mahsa Amini, 22, was with her brother at a train station in Tehran when she was stopped by the morality police. She was accused of not complying with the country's hijab rules. She was detained, and 3 days later, she was dead. While the government argues that she had underlying health conditions, learned something from American police now, have we? That she had underlying health conditions, her family and thousands of protesters believe she was killed. This journalist's name is very scary, guys. I'm just going to say the journalist's last name, okay? Journalist Mortazavi tells me, trust me, no, the first name is something that if I pronounce it in even the slightest, tiniest wrong way, Zan's gone, okay? I'll have to get a new new pronouns. I'll never be able to contact any of my mutuals ever again, okay? Yeah. Let's just, yes, it is. That is the name, Cobalt Swift Paul. That is the journalist's first name, yes. Journalist Mortazavi tells Michael Safi why Amini's death has sparked such grief and anger in Iran. Raha Bahraini, a human rights lawyer at Amnesty International, has been speaking to protesters who have been on the streets. And then, of course, we have like the whole audio clip of it, but we're not going to read all of that. That is the main background. This woman was taken by the morality police into custody and died. She was killed. Now, I believe that there has been more details about how exactly it happened already, but I don't think it's necessary to dig into that. What's more important, I think, is the fact that her death has inspired massive protests all across Iran. Now, I think it goes without saying that I support these protests, but I do want to acknowledge the sort of, as I mentioned before, the looming cloud of Islamophobia that scares what I think causes a lot of white liberals to be a little scared to talk about this particular topic. Because you see, hypers in chat, if you've seen some who you would end up finding out to be Islamophobic, arguably quite racist chud, start out their rhetoric with like atheism stuff, right? I think Sam Harris is a good example of this, where like you start out by saying, oh yeah, I think all religion is cringe. Islam, Christianity, it's all bad, all cringe. But then a couple years later, they're saying, well, you see, Christianity has had a reform, okay? Christianity has reformed for modern day sensibilities and modern day culture, so it does not cause any harm to the world as far as religions go. Islam, on the other hand, is a barbaric religion, and the people who worship it, they frankly should not be allowed into our country. And like, you literally go from like supposedly rational, like centrist atheist who like thinks all religion is stupid to, oh wait, now you think that America was built on hegemonic Christian values and that Islam and whatnot are bad. Like you've heard it. You've heard that shit. So I think it's safe to say there is reason to worry about how pointing out even objective examples of like something that is so strongly associated with Islam being bad and supporting people protesting against laws like enforcing it. I do understand how there can be concern, but I don't think that means we shouldn't call out the fact that this is unjust. These are unjust laws. I know that there are going to be conservatives, chuds, reactionaries, Islamophobes. I mean, we're literally coming off of a presidency where Donald Trump literally passed a bill that specifically temporarily banned immigration from Muslim majority countries, despite there being no evidence whatsoever that there was any quote unquote terroristic threat, as he said, to come from those countries at any point, anytime soon. It was done for no other reason than to raise paranoia and to raise support within the more racist side of his voter base. I completely forgot about that. That was insane. That's the thing. I don't forget about these things. I remember them, okay? I remember these things, and I start to see patterns, okay? So, to be clear, chuds are going to try to use this stuff as like in an Islamophobic way. They're going to try to take videos of like of women in Iran at these protests, like burning their veils that they themselves, in their personal beliefs, don't want to wear. And they're going to say, look at these women breaking free of the tyranny of the scary brown people religion. Because I'm going to be very honest with you guys. A lot of Americans see Islam as the scary brown people religion. It's true. America is very racist. And ever since 9/11 in particular, there has been a massive, it's like a disease, like a rot of Islamophobia kind of spreading, right? And it's sad because obviously, if you guys know my positions on religion, you guys can guess what I think of Islam conceptually. I think that the vast majority of maybe not the vast majority. I'll say I don't know enough to say the vast majority, but the vast majority of what I have seen of Islamic principles, I do think are either like, yeah, okay, yeah, I mean, sure, I don't need anything to tell me this, or like, I don't know about this one right here, I don't know about that particular tenet, but I don't think that should in any way impart a moral judgment on everybody who celebrates that religion. And the same way that I make a distinction between, say, those that are Christians in order to, like, feel morally superior to everybody else, and they like preach to everybody, and they do the whole fire and brimstone, you're gonna go to hell, or I'm praying for you passive aggressively type shit, and the people who are Christians that genuinely just want to feel some sort of security, some sort of faith that there is somewhere after death, that their loved ones who have passed away have gone somewhere. I think I literally distinguish between those types of Christians. I think it is important to distinguish between those types of people in any religion, the fundamentalists who stick to the more harmful and problematic aspects of literally thousands of year old, arguably cults, just institutionalized cults. So now we call them religions. Like, obviously, yeah, there's problems there, but I think that it's important that you want to have a free society. You never want to have a country that determines how you can worship, who you can worship, and what you can worship, and especially not whether or not you can worship at all. I think that's usually that's not a recipe for anything good. Anyway. All right. Protesters rally across Iran in the third week of unrest over Amini's death. Dubai, October 1st, Reuters. Protesters rallied across Iran, and strikes were reported throughout the country's Kurdish region on Saturday as demonstrations ignited by the death of a woman in police custody entered their third week. The protests sparked by the death of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old from Iranian Kurdistan, have spiraled into the biggest show of opposition to Iran's clerical authorities since 2019, with dozens killed in unrest across the country. People also demonstrated in London, Rome, Madrid, and other Western cities in solidarity with Iranian protesters, holding pictures of Amini, who died 3 days after being arrested by the Islamic Republic's morality police for unsuitable attire. In Iran, social media posts showed rallies in large cities including Tehran, Isfahan, as I'm going to assume it would be pronounced. My bad if I mispronounced it. Rast and Shiraz. Can I just say, by the way, I really wish places in America sounded like this. I'm going to be real. Any location and in a language that isn't English typically sounds cooler just to hear. Like, if you hear that someone is going to Shiraz, you're like, oh, cool. Oh, fuck, that sounds awesome. Like, all right, cool. But then you hear someone says, yeah, I'm going to go to fucking Old West bumfuck down the lane. It's like, okay, go enjoy your trip or whatever. I don't know. Just sounds cooler. We need to get on top of naming things better. In Tehran's traditional business district of Bazaar, anti-government protesters chanted, "We will be killed one by one if we don't unite." While elsewhere, they blocked a main road with a fence torn from the central reservation. Videos shared by the widely followed Tavsir 1500 Twitter account showed. God, thank God. Thank God, just like what we've seen with Ukraine and the war happening with Russia and the invasion of Russia, sorry. I'm so glad that everybody has a cell phone with some kind of an internet connection now and some type of social media that could make shit go viral. Because how many times have you guys seen like literal war crimes that Russia has committed caught on video simply because somebody had their phone and filmed it for TikTok? I literally am subscribed to the R Combat footage subreddit, so I've seen quite a few examples of that. That's why I think it is so goddamn important that so much of Russia's crimes get shown to the entire world as possible. I think the worst thing that can come out of all of this, maybe not the worst thing, one of the worst things that could come out of all of this is that Russia could successfully bury it all and make everyone forget that this would fade into the annals of history and it'll just be like, remember when Russia invaded Ukraine again? And it's just like, I know that's what's going to happen, but I hope that it's not. I hope that like 20 years from now, 50, 100, 300 years from now, kids are learning about the fact that Russia committed war crimes against Ukraine in 2022. Sorry to get drawn away from the topic at hand, by the way. Let's get back to it. Reuters cannot verify the social media reports. The protests began at Amini's funeral on September 17th and spread to Iran's 31 provinces, with all layers of society, including ethnic and religious minorities, taking part and many demanding Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's downfall. I will say that it really is a fun name to say. So, like, saying long names and getting it down or feeling like you got it down gives you like a little, I feel like gives me a drop of dopamine, you know? Something about it. Hundreds injured. Amnesty International has said a government crackdown on demonstrations has thus far led to the death of at least 52 people, with hundreds injured. Rights groups say dozens of activists, students, and artists have been detained. In London, about 2,500 people, many of them Iranians, staged a noisy protest. A noisy protest. Dude, okay, listen. Have you guys noticed the framing of this? Like, how hardcore the desire to remain as, like, centrist as possible on this is? It's weird. It feels like liberal organizations are so scared to call this out. It really feels like a lot of the coverage of this stuff from, like, you know, your mainstream media, like, liberal establishment organizations. Like, I will say, I have not been as disappointed in the establishment media as I have been with the coverage of this protest in Iran, the protests in Iran, and the election of that fascist bat lady in Italy. I really don't know why they call her a bat. All I know is I just keep on seeing posts in Italian calling her a bat and posting images of her flipped upside down on Twitter. And so I guess they're just calling her a bat now. I mean, okay, sure, fine, all right. I think she's more of a bird, but, you know, works for me. But, you know, sure. I've been very disappointed in the way that the establishment sort of media has been covering these things. In Paris, a crowd of several dozen people held Iranian flags and pictures of victims who have died in the protests. In Madrid, an Iranian woman cut her hair during a protest attended by dozens of people, echoing demonstrations in Iran where women have also been waving and burning their veils during demonstrations. Iran's currency neared historic lows reached in June as desperate Iranians bought dollars to protect their savings. Amid little hope, Tehran's nuclear deal with world powers would be revived, and concerns over the economic consequences of the unrest. Oh god, I forgot about the fucking Iran nuclear deal. Chat, I think I need to do a research stream one of these days about the Iran nuclear deal, because that all went through when I was like 15 or 16 years old, like not really into politics yet. So that's like I gotta go and like catch up on that lore. I gotta go back and I gotta catch up on the Iran nuclear deal lore. Maybe we'll do that. Yeah, maybe later. Maybe later in the stream. That could be educational. The rial fell to 331,200 rial? Is it pronounced real? I'm pretty sure it's pronounced real. Pronounce it. Pronounce it. Pronounce it. Come on, Google.
Rial.
Yep, it's real. Cool. The rial fell to 331,200 per US dollar, compared to its 321,200 on Friday, according to the foreign exchange site Bombast.com. The currency had plummeted to an all-time low of 332,000 per dollar on June 12th. That's a little rough. Iranian authorities say many members of the security forces have been killed, accusing the United States of exploiting the unrest to try to destabilize Iran. That is hilarious. That is actually fucking hilarious. Because, if anything, I feel like establishment organizations have done nothing but, like, cover this in the most inoffensive way possible. Even if you're like a liberal who's like pretty Islamophobic and like, fuck Islam, I don't like the fact that they make women wear veils, and so I think it should be banned or whatever. Like, if you're one of those types of liberals, and liberals like that do exist, believe it or not. Like, there are people that think that way, that think Islam is this like uniquely, it's a word for something old, something not barbaric, no, something old, something that's like outdated. Archaic, maybe. Yeah, archaic. Like that there's some uniqueness to the archaicness of Islam or something, that it needs to be like eradicated as far as like the or like heavily antiquated is good too, or like reformed or whatever. It really does feel like dog whistles and cover-ups for people that want to engage in racism towards people from like Muslim majority countries without outright doing it, right? And trust me, we all know that most bigots are not brave enough to outright say what they believe. They have to appropriate narratives and twist the truth to make it seem like they're speaking some extremely popular but silenced reality that everyone's just too afraid to say except for them. Anyway, the Revolutionary Guards said 4 members of its forces and the volunteer Basij militia were killed on Friday in attacks in Zahidan, I'm guessing, capital of the southeastern Sistan Baluchistan province. You know, every time I read the name of a place that I've never heard of before, it just kind of like, it makes my mental map of how big I feel like the world is get bigger. You know how like when you're a kid and you've never even left the state you grew up in, you think the world, you just kind of feel like the world, you have a very like warped perception of how big the world really is. Then you travel out of state for the first time and you're like, oh my God, it takes hours to get out of a state to the next one. And then like you cross country for the first time, then you get out of the country. Like, I've never left the country ever in my life, but regardless, you start to realize how big the world really is. That happens to me as well with learning of like the names of cities, particular cities that I've never heard of that are really big, like, or like well known outside of like America. One day, chat, the Xanderhal World Tour will happen. All right, here's where things get a bit heavier. The Zahidan Shootout. State television said on Friday that 19 people, including members of the security forces, had been killed in Zahidan after unidentified individuals opened fire on a police station, prompting security forces to return fire. Authorities blamed the separatist group from the Baluchi minority for starting the shootout in Zahidan. State media said 2 prominent militants linked to that group had been killed. IRNA posted a video showing destroyed cars, an overturned and burning trailer or bus, and fires in burnt-out buildings and shops, describing it as footage of what the terrorists did to the people's shops last night in Zahidan. Listen, is there any reason to suspect that that is not a very honest recollection of what really occurred? Is it perhaps more likely that that's not exactly what happened? Because that sounds very propagandistic, you know? I feel like there's a very big difference between, like, this tragedy, there was an attack here, it was a tragedy and like we believe that the attack was motivated by this or whatever, like, and saying what terrorists did to the people's shops last night in a very propagandistic seeming way in a time when you are literally seemingly trying to demonize and kind of throw in everybody protesting with said supposedly violent, like, rebel group. I don't know. You know, it just kind of reminds me of the type of propaganda that we see here in America where, like, anytime, like, left-wing protesters do anything, they're called Antifa. Or even better, like, whenever Republican protesters do something crazy, they're called Antifa because the right has to, like, save face. Many miles may separate us, but most people and most countries are actually a lot more alike than you'd ever think. Protests have been particularly intense in Iran's Kurdistan region, where authorities have previously put down unrest by the Kurdish minority numbering up to 10 million. What a way to word that. Protests have been particularly intense in Iran's Kurdistan region, where authorities have previously put down unrest by the Kurdish minority, numbering up to 10 million. That sounds a little bit... Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Most contexts that I hear about the Kurds in, they're being genocided. Maybe I'm wrong, but every time I hear about the Kurds, someone is genociding them. Somebody. The group that you could call Kurds is actually so fucking massive that it's kind of hard to say who, like, such a massive fucking group that refers to, but regardless, like, I'm a little bit, judging off of what Iran is currently in the news for, and how propagandistic that sounds, I feel like this may be perhaps a misrepresentation, a softening, maybe, of what actually happened. These are just my instincts. I am literally just voicing my inner monologue, my instincts to you guys. Yep, Kurds are so badass, lovely people. That's what I've heard. I've heard all sorts of great things about the Kurds, and I'm not talking about the cheese kind. You know what kind of really... Wait, hold on. Yeah, wait, here's a perfect example. Hold on. Let's find an article where conservatives call the BLM protests riots. So here we've got a Fox News article called Defund the Police Push. God damn it, Fox News. Liberal policies driving Chicago business exodus, hurting poor the most, experts say. And it's basically a Fox News tier truthfulness article talking about how the protests in, like the BLM protests are all being done by white, wealthy liberals that are destroying black communities. And actually, protesting against police brutality means that you're actually the real racist because all the protests from their perspective are just burning down entire cities, entire black communities from their perspective. And so, in fact, those that are protesting against the injustice are the bad guys. Does that not sound familiar, or perhaps a little bit similar to the quote, this is what these terrorists did to Iranian businesses last night after, like, the protest? Does that not feel like there's a bit of a connection there? I'm telling you guys, it doesn't matter what country you're from. It doesn't matter what your skin color is, what your gender is, who you are, what language you speak, okay? I feel like conservative propaganda, like the propaganda that this kind of stuff, the idea, the feeling that this kind of propaganda thrives off of is universal. It really, really is. Everyone, everywhere feels the vibes that conservative propaganda bases itself on. And conservative propaganda, it entirely bases itself off of vibes. When was the last time you heard an argument from a conservative that wasn't basically entirely vibe-based? I'm listening. When was the last time we responded to an argument from a conservative that wasn't pretty much just vibes? Like, isn't it crazy how woke Hollywood's been lately, guys? Like, okay. Vibes, I guess? Is that what this is? We're just supposed to agree that things have felt wrong recently, and so you're right? Yeah, I don't know. Listen, I want to be clear here. There are absolutely people that are going to weaponize this shit to push racist, xenophobic, and especially Islamophobic propaganda, which is bad. Call it out. Call it out. You should. But I think right now it is very important that the American left stands with the protesters in Iran right now. I think it's very, very important. Because the protesters in Iran right now, I believe, personally, I think they're on the right side of history. Not that's a very controversial take on the left or anything, but I think it's an important thing to talk about. And I don't think that white liberals, if they are, should be afraid of talking about this and spreading awareness about the protests because they're too afraid that they'll come off as seeming Islamophobic or racist. I think that's super duper cringe. I think it's really fucking cringe to be so hyper obsessed as a white person with sounding racist because you like came off the wrong way that you keep yourself from stating like outright true facts about how bad racism is. Like if you've gotten to the point where you're too scared to talk about how bad racism is because you're worried that it could be misinterpreted and you're like so caught up as like a white, I don't know, it just seems super duper cringe. And, like, a weird mindset that a lot of white liberals get. Just say it. Just say it, all right? Call the conservatives racist and say exactly what they think, okay? Say it. Say the conservatives think that brown people are fucking degenerates that just do drugs and commit crime all day. Like, there's nothing wrong with saying that's what conservatives believe. You are not going to look racist for outright stating what these people think. It's true. That's what they think. Call that shit out. Call it out. Absolutely. Be full-on Giga Chad, stone-faced, straight up say, that was racist. And then refuse to elaborate and then leave the call. All right, listen. I hope that this segment educated you all. Now, I want to be very clear. I did not cover anywhere near everything that I'd like to talk about. As a matter of fact, I'm literally right now remembering like a dozen things that I wish I'd brought up because they were cool little details. Like, for example, I did not know this. Thank you, American education. I did not know this until my big research spree the other day on the history of Iran. But I don't know why, but I just kind of always assumed that, like, I did not know that Persia and Iran were the same country, but Persia had been renamed to Iran. And then I read the story behind it, and I'm actually curious. Is it sus shit? Is it sus? I'm really, really curious because Iran translates to, like, the land of Aryans. And I read that and I was like, the what? Huh? From what little I've heard, it's pretty sus. I think it has to do with Nazis. Yeah. I read that and I was like, I leaned in for a moment. I was like, That I did not expect to dip in. I did not expect to hear that word be brought up, but okay. Yeah, I read it and I was like, Anyway, so yeah, I did not know that there was a rebrand. Sorry to dead name Iran, by the way. I don't mean to be rude. Anyway, listen, guys. If you felt that you were educated by this topic, if you are, hopefully what this did was sparked an interest for you guys to do more research on your own, because God knows, in the format that I do this type of content, there's just too much to discuss, too much nuance, too much history, too many details, too many different people, too many names, too many dates, and all of that for me to, off the top of my head and with nothing but a few notes that I wrote down, to discuss this entirety and within all of its, like, fleshed out detail. I really do hope that this video inspires people to do their own research about this, though, because the grind of research that I went on these last few days about this has been definitely pretty interesting. This is just an entire part of the world's history that American school kids just don't learn, and you just don't really learn this shit unless you go to college and, like, you know, take classes in history that end up going a little bit more into detail, or if you, like, do what I did and go look it up yourself or watch documentaries or something along those lines. You know, just not, you don't really learn about the history of other countries, and certainly not in anywhere near enough detail in American schooling. We're very much taught an American-centric history. History began 350 years ago, as far as the American school system is concerned. You spend about 20% of history learning about everything before 350 years ago, roughly, and then 80% of history is learning about the last 350 years of America. Hey, Xander Corvus, what's up? I see you over there in YouTube chat. What's going on, my man? My fellow Xander, my fellow person with the name Xander. You should come to the website. It's pog as fuck. This is where all the poggers people hang out, at the Xanderhal.com website. Anyway, listen. Please, I recommend you guys learn more about this in your own time, but if you enjoyed what you did learn, if I piqued your interest a little bit, then please consider leaving a like, both whether or not you're watching live right now, if you're watching the stream like as you're, right now while you're watching, or if you're watching after the fact, then please consider dropping a like. It really does help. It just significantly boosts the channel and the algorithm. And if you're watching this video, and you want to see more from me and you want to see more content on YouTube when I go live, when I upload shorts, anything like that, consider subscribing and ring the bell icon to turn on all notifications so that YouTube actually tells you when I go live or when I upload a new video. And of course, if you want to see more from me online in general, you can follow my social media. All of it, of course, is linked down below in the description. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, fan Discord, all of that. Go follow it, especially my Twitter. That's where all the spiciest memes happen, and that's where you can really stay caught up with the Xanderhal lore. Finally, if you want to support me financially, though, directly, and you've got the money for it, and you really want to help out my content, and just, really help the channel, really keep the channel going, then consider dropping a subscription or gifting a sub or even donating on my website, xanderhal.com/live. Every donation, every subscription, every gifted sub, of course, is very appreciated. The same goes for any support you guys lend on YouTube, Twitch, Streamlabs, Stream Elements, or Patreon as well. As always, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and have a good one.